There's really no way to ease off into a topic of this complexity. What I'm about to introduce to you is called dimensional membrane theory. It is in theoretical physics, and we're going to be talking in general concepts about field hybridization and field convergence. And we're not going to be talking about worlds in collision, but rather about dimensions colliding and what actually happens. This is according to some of the best theoretical physicists who have already been contemplating this concept, but haven't done the research conducted by Jason Breshears of the RKX YouTube channel, who actually show from the historical record that this is the answer to all the anomalies of what's been going on. Nemesis X and Phoenix chronology document the points of field convergence with the Terrasphere. These dates are when worlds collide, and there is an exchange of information, life, and phenomena. During these 60-year windows, we have contact with the master world. What you're looking at on the left is Nemesis X. On the far right is our world, the world you know, the world of phenomena of sense and perception. It is the Terrasphere. It's Earth. But during the 60-year convergence period, when Nemesis X is actually converging with the Terrasphere, it creates what's known as a tertiary field. Tertiary means third field or level. We can say from our point of reference that the Terrasphere Earth is one, but when Nemesis X field comes into contact with ours, there's an overlay. The tertiary field during the 60-year window is where all the magic happens. The tertiary field is where all the phase transitions, the field interactions, and all the anomalies occur. Both Phoenix and Nemesis X are dimensional overlays that exchange information with the Terrasphere. This is how we can account for the collision of two separate world dimensions that have their own distinct ecosystems, but they form a tertiary system that remains intact in both systems after the fields separate. Basically, this is a macro concept, but let's apply it to the micro in the world of terraspheric phenomena. Jason has previously presented the evidence that the orbs are operating on the exact same principle. He's talked about the Bermuda Triangle, as well as Malaysian Flight 370, and how the orbs made it disappear. He's talked about how orbs are inside volcanoes right before volcanic activity, inside tsunamis, and even inside the funnels of tornadoes. And there are eyewitness accounts of orb phenomena going on around vehicles, aircraft, and even people when they vanish. About 2 years ago, Jason described what he referred to as a dimensional envelope. He didn't have another word for it, but he now understands that it's actually a tertiary field. He described how we have our phi and pi physics right here in the Terrasphere. But what if something else is operating in a different mathematical structuring? What if that field overlaid our current position? There would be a tertiary field, an interference pattern. But it's not even really an interference pattern. It's an overlay. And you can exist in the tertiary field because inside are all the same physics constants and biological laws that allows you to exist in the Terrasphere. But there's also an overlay of the field with different laws, with all kinds of different information, but from another source that's not the Terrasphere. When the other source is able to become more real, meaning when you face into it more and you're less in the Terrasphere, it can literally pull you right out of the dimension. And this is what Jason has described many times as the UFO human abduction phenomenon. Dimensional envelopes are when two fields overlay and you're caught in the middle, and then the stronger field is able to pull you right out of the weaker field. This tertiary field is the gate or portal, not the Terrasphere or Nemesis X. It's the magic door of Qutb. This is the point of ingress and egress between worlds. and there is a 60-year window when men and materials are exchanged between worlds. It's also happened in the past when, for whatever reason, there wasn't enough balance. But what exactly is Nemesis? It's the bringer of balance. At least, that's the role of the Greek goddess Nemesis. She became associated with vengeance, but her earliest role was the keeper of the scales, like you see on the third horseman. She was the bringer of balance, and often to create balance, it required vengeance, or what was perceived by the victims as vengeance. In the past, Nemesis actually destroyed the Terrasphere, and everything had to start over because, for some reason, the fields were incompatible, and it basically forced a field neutralization. What are we talking about? A non-convergence that shut down our world and flash froze everything. This is the origin of most of the fossils. It's called the Medusa effect. From the bottom of the sea levels, jellyfish on up to the highest mountains, our entire world flash froze. And as it thawed, that's when the fossilization, the mineralization occurred. That's why the fossil record is full of butterfly wings, full of moth wings, and full of jellyfish in 3D as if they're still in the water. Why? Because the whole world flash froze. That probably only happened because when you have a field convergence, the stronger field is going to flip the polarity of the weaker field every single time. And that flip is instantaneous because we're not dealing with planets, but rather with field mechanics. And when a strong field comes in contact with a weaker field, the weaker field's polarity flips. When the flip occurs, the whole world, as we know it, freezes. It's flash frozen. It's a very simple concept, but it's just hard to wrap your mind around it because we've been brainwashed into believing in the uniformitarian model of planets rather than a construct. But two distinct mathematical fields possessing the information that supports, regulates, and perpetuates ecosystems can converge, creating this tertiary field. And materials and phenomena can be exchanged within the tertiary field environment. Someone in the Terrasphere can wander into the tertiary field where things are just really different and weird, but they're still habitable. They're still livable. And in the tertiary field, that individual from the Terrasphere can move to a point of location that puts them in the Nemesis X field. And when the fields separate, the person that was formerly in the Terrasphere is now, for the next 732 years, in the Nemesis X field, because there will be no tertiary fields during that 732 window. If someone wanted to travel from Earth to the Nemesis plane, they would have to wait for a convergence point to appear. And right now, the next point of contact when the tertiary field will be created starts in 2046, and it does not end until 2106. Full field immersion is probably very rare, that is, when the entire Nemesis field overlays our Terrasphere. Most of the time, we just get the tertiary field action. It's only been a few times in history when we actually had full field immersion or coalescence, such as the one we had in the Dark Ages. In the past, the Nemesis plane overlays probably occurred at specific nodal points that we call dates on our calendars that Jason has shown on his charts. And some of these points of contact later produced calendars because ancient people wanted to calculate the next field convergences. Remember, in Archaics, Jason has shown how odd it is that all these ancient cataclysms started calendars, and yet the calendars were always exposal impositions, always created by the survivors, and the calendars always counted forward. We never could figure out why. Why are they making calendars that count forward? Just like the Mayan long count was a day count system, they counted down to the day. They wanted to know exactly when the next big field convergence was going to occur. And there's evidence that the Nemesis plane contact creates tertiary fields that only touch one area of the Terrasphere at a time. This evidence is seen in the sudden appearance of human types that began in one area of the world as if they suddenly appeared there. The marsupial ecosystem is an excellent example of local field convergence that did not affect the rest of the world. The marsupial ecosystem and the plants of the southern hemisphere are unique and complex, and they are not found anywhere else naturally in the world. The tertiary field is actually a symbiosis between worlds. This entire framework suggests interdimensional interactions are not random, but potentially structured systemic quantum events with inherent evolutionary potential. Now, when we say evolutionary, we're not meaning developmental, not in the natural selection context. But field convergences can correct problems because Nemesis is the balancer. If the controllers have seen that for 732 years something's not working, they can wait for the next field convergence to introduce new material through the tertiary field in order to correct the situation. Nothing's changed in the archaic model, and we are still being observed. We are in a confined environment, which is the nature of the construct. All this does is add quite a bit of clarity. What is the evidence? The evidence of tertiary field transition is everywhere. New life forms have appeared in the world with no trace of pre-existing development. Evolution, natural selection can't account for this. The fossil record does not show transitional forms. It only shows explosions of life. The Cambrian explosion is still a mystery to paleobotany and paleontology. It's called the Cambrian explosion because in the Cambrian times, like 500 million years ago, all these life forms just exploded onto the scene. Complex life forms of absolutely no transitional forms. New life forms appear in this world with no trace of pre-existing development. Why? Because they came from somewhere else. Other archaic videos have shown where things fell out of a blue sky, including all different types of species of animals, even fossils and carbonaceous material. What does Phoenix bring? Phoenix doesn't bring life. Phoenix brings red mud, red rain, red dirt, and edits. How are these edits possible? It's a tertiary field. What have we documented in 1902? It's very apparent that the Phoenix created a tertiary field and all kinds of things suddenly appeared in our world, all in the same year. Instead of Nemesis X on the left, it would have been the Phoenix, and the tertiary field is a 1902 exchange of information between whatever the Phoenix world is and our world. We've got to get the uniformitarian model of planets and solar system out of our field of thought because it was specifically designed to keep us from making these discoveries. Evidence of tertiary field transition is also geological and geographical evidence of systemic destructions that wiped out all life. If all life was wiped out multiple times in the past, as we can see in the fossil record, then how did the same forms that are in the fossil record get found in our backyards today with no development whatsoever? They must be coming from somewhere else. If the polarity gets flipped on our field multiple times to end the experiment here, and then it gets rebooted and starts over with all new life forms, but the new life forms are still based on the old programming, we have our answer, because evolution and natural selection don't answer these questions for us. Evidence of tertiary field transition is the existence of the exact same life forms after systemic cataclysms that existed prior to the destruction, as well as the sudden appearance of new types of the same life forms, as if they were modified or had adapted to entirely different conditions. Different races of humans just suddenly appearing with no transitional forms and no apparent reason for the adaptations, as if for a long period of time that race of people were somewhere else, And 732 years later, when they were introduced into the Terrasphere, it was after a long period of development elsewhere. Artifacts in architecture that make absolutely no sense under the present field physics, but seem to stem from entirely different environmental conditions, is also evidence of tertiary field transition. We also don't know what the laws of physics are like during those 60-year windows and what we can and cannot do. The reason we don't is because right now we are subject 100% to the Terrasphere. But what are the laws of physics like in the Nemesis X plane? When these two planes converge and create a tertiary field, every geographical area inside the tertiary field is subject to the laws of physics of both planes. Imagine what people can do in the tertiary field environment. The sudden appearances of new races of humans, as well as evidence of past races of humans that no longer exist, are possible. Remember, folks, Cro-Magnon just suddenly appeared, but by the time they appeared in our world, they were already dying out. They were a post-cataclysm breed of people, and yet the Cro-Magnon was a sedentary race and very advanced. By the time we found all their skeletons, they were in the caves of the earth and they were few in number. They were being eaten by the surviving pockets of Neanderthal. Past field convergences, carrying with them many non-local connections between fields, are what we refer to as entanglement. This dynamic means that the closer two fields are getting to one another, the information in both fields is becoming destabilized as these non-local connections are preparing to merge and create a tertiary field. Pay attention to what I'm telling you. What this means in our world of perception is that people and events will begin to behave erratically. Those souls that are most aligned with their environment are those who will become the most destabilized during this transitional phase, meaning the most non-spiritual people during field convergence are weighed down by the phenomena of both the Terrasphere and the Nemesis plane, and are subject to both mathematical constructs and the phenomena and life forms of both. This means that people living in the Terrasphere, our world, or on the Nemesis plane who are not a slave to their avatars, by understanding that they are actually souls moored to source, are the ones positively affected by the tertiary field overlay and can freely move from Earth to Nemesis and back during the phase period. Remember, some of the laws that we live by in the Terrasphere Earth are spiritual laws, and those spiritual laws are going to work in every field. Doesn't matter what the Nemesis field world is like, but a soul that is moored to source, that looks within, will always be powerful no matter where he is located. But the soul that relies on the avatar as a vehicle to get through the world and believes that the avatar is affected by all external stimuli, the soul that lives a reactive life, is the one that's going to be harmed the most by the tertiary field and everything that comes through it.